The storm had swallowed the entire city of Seattle that night, turning sidewalks into rivers and making the skyline vanish behind sheets of roaring silver. Cars rushed by with frantic splashes, horns blaring, people running with coats over their heads, everyone desperate to escape the downpour. But Jonathan Hale, the notoriously ruthless CEO of Hale Enterprises, barely noticed the storm as his black sedan crawled through traffic. He was too busy reviewing quarterly reports, too consumed with numbers, profits, and the cold empire he had built brick by brick, wall by wall. His life was success, power, control, nothing more, and certainly nothing less. But everything changed the moment his eyes caught a small, fragile scene outside the rain-spattered window. A young woman, drenched from head to toe, sat on the curb beside a bus stop that seemed abandoned by the world. Her hair clung to her face, soaked through, her thin sweater pasted to her trembling shoulders. In her arms, wrapped in nothing but a damp blanket, was a baby no more than a few months old. And despite the rain crashing down around her, the mother held a small bottle to the baby's lips, whispering with the kind of tenderness the storm couldn't drown out. Jonathan felt something unfamiliar squeeze inside his chest, something almost painful, something he hadn't felt in years. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. It truly helps us reach more hearts with stories like this. Jonathan told himself to look away, told himself it wasn't his business. But the image refused to let go, lodging itself into his thoughts like a splinter he couldn't pull out. His driver stopped at a red light, giving him one more unfiltered look at the heartbreaking scene. Cars rode past her, uncaring. People rushed by beneath umbrellas. No one bothered to see her. No one cared that she was shivering, holding an infant in a storm as though her own body was the only shelter. She had to offer. Something snapped inside Jonathan, softly, quietly, but undeniably. Without knowing why, he ordered his driver to pull over. He stepped out into the freezing rain, the cold striking him like needles. His tailored suit soaked instantly, but he barely felt it. All he saw was her, the woman, the child, the desperation she tried so hard to hide. When she looked up, her eyes were red, not from the rain but from exhaustion, maybe from fear, maybe from everything life had thrown at her. Her name, he later learned, was Sarah Whitmore, and she had once dreamed of becoming a nurse before life twisted itself into something she no longer recognized. She had fled an abusive home, had no family left to turn to, and her only priority was the infant boy she named Noah. She tried to work, but no employer wanted a young mother who had no one to watch her baby. The shelters were full, the wait lists were long, and so she found herself sitting on a cold street corner, feeding her child in a storm, because she had nowhere else to go. Jonathan didn't know any of this at that moment. He only knew that he saw a kind of pain he had spent his entire life ignoring in others. Sarah refused help at first, her pride a fragile shield. But her baby's shivering hands broke that final barrier, and Jonathan found himself rushing her into his car, asking his driver to turn up the heat, wrapping his own coat around the infant. As they drove, he realized how fragile the line was between comfort and collapse, how life could flip entirely with one cruel moment. He thought about his own past, one he rarely let himself remember, the mother who raised him alone, the nights they spent in tiny apartments with barely enough heat, her hands always cold but her smile always warm. And then he thought about how money and ambition had turned him into someone she wouldn't recognize. He took Sarah and her baby to a nearby hotel and paid for a room without hesitation. He ordered warm food, dry clothes, baby formula, blankets, anything he could think of. At first he told himself he was only helping because he felt obligated, because no decent person would leave a mother and child in the rain. But deep down, he knew it was more. Something about Sarah reminded him of everything he'd buried under years of ruthlessness. She reminded him of the humanity he had lost somewhere along the climb. He left that first night telling himself the story was over, that he had done enough, but he couldn't sleep. The rain kept pounding on his windows, and with every strike he remembered the way Sarah held her baby close, using her own warmth to shield him. By morning, Jonathan found himself back at the hotel, unsure why he returned but unable to stay away. Sarah was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding her child and whispering to him. She looked startled when Jonathan walked in, as though she never expected to see him again. What began as a single act of kindness slowly evolved into something deeper and more unexpected. Jonathan found himself helping her search for stable housing, calling in favors he rarely used, offering her resources he didn't even know he had access to until he went looking. He watched Sarah fight through every obstacle with a quiet strength that astonished him. She never asked for more than what she needed. She never complained. She never demanded. Her gratitude wasn't loud, it was soft, sincere, and carried in the way she looked at her son rather than at him. Days turned into weeks, and Jonathan realized that helping her wasn't taking something from him. It was restoring something within him. The world Sarah came from was one he had forgotten existed, a world where people struggled silently, where small acts of kindness could alter entire futures. And Noah, with his big innocent eyes, latched onto Jonathan with a surprising familiarity, as though sensing the man's long-buried tenderness. Jonathan eventually offered Sarah a job at his company, not out of pity, but because he recognized the intelligence, compassion, and resilience she possessed. She grew into the role with remarkable determination. Slowly, Jonathan's employees noticed changes in him too. He became more patient, more present, more human. The ice he had carried inside him for years began to thaw. But the true turning point came one evening when Jonathan visited Sarah's new apartment. A modest place, but warm, safe, and filled with small touches of hope. Sarah was feeding Noah again, but this time there was no rain, no fear, no cold. Jonathan watched them quietly from the doorway, and emotion swelled in his chest. He understood then that the moment he stopped his car, that stormy night wasn't a coincidence. It had been a lifeline, not just for Sarah, but for him too. Near the end of the visit, Sarah thanked him. Not with dramatic speeches, not with grand gestures, but with a simple, heartfelt look that said everything words never could. Jonathan realized he didn't just help save her life, she had saved his. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps us continue creating meaningful stories. Before we end, tell us in the comments below what part of this story moved you the most. And that night, as Jonathan walked back to his car, he looked up at the sky. The storm had long passed, the clouds had parted, and for the first time in years, he felt the warmth of something he thought he'd lost forever: hope.